Oh man, Castlevania. The name alone is so legendary that I can even say it without being like, ooh, Castlevania. Since way back in the 80s, it's been like the prime father of horror in video games. Well, alright, there's been horror-themed games before Castlevania, like Haunted House for the Atari 2600. Or Nosferatu the Vampire for the C64. These games weren't good. No. The only creepy thing about them are the terrible graphics, the non-existent gameplay, and the sounds that sound like two robots humping each other. I mean, listen to that.
We got it together, didn't we?
Castlevania changed everything. I mean, just look at the graphics and the music and the sound effects, and the aesthetics is also fucking good. It had super tight control. Oh, damn it! It had a challenging control scheme, perfectly designed stages, and you fought against zombies, medusas, demonic knights, panthers, giant bats, mermen, these monkey thingies, anthropomorphic death, Frankenstein, and Dracula himself. Swear to God, his evil face on the cover alone was enough to make people crap their pants. Well, not me. I don't do that. I don't crap my pants. It had the maximum amount of horror you could put in a game of that time period. People loved it. It became an instant classic and the foundation for one of the most popular franchises in gaming history, which spawned like a bazillion games. Some great games, some mediocre ones, and some not so good games. And like with every series, some titles stand out like a knight in shining armor. And in the case of Castlevania, there are two titles that people are still debating about which title is like the best Castlevania ever. No, Gaiman's Quest, not you. No one likes you. Now get in the corner and feel ashamed. That's right, good boy. So today we're gonna find out which Castlevania is actually the best Castlevania ever. Super Castlevania 4 or Symphony of the Night. So, Castlevania on the NES was a big-time success, both commercially and fan receptionally. So Konami decided to pop out some sequels. The first one was Simon's Quest. Yeah, that one. To be fair, they tried something new. Opened up the world, made it more exploration-based. But it was overall rubbish. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but it left you in the dark about what the game expected of you. Only threw super cryptic hints at you, made you grind mindlessly, secrets that were virtually impossible to find out on your own, which are even required to finish the game. Stupid boss battles and the maybe most anticlimactic finale in gaming history. Hooray! Castlevania 3! Dracula's Curse! With Castlevania 3, Konami decided to dump the new approach of Simon's Quest and steered back towards the linear style of Castlevania 1. Like, literally, the game looks and feels 100% like the first installment. It's more like a huge content add-on with a few neat additions here and there, like new enemies, new bosses, gears, and other playable characters. Which is nice, I guess. The year is 1991. Super Nintendo came out, and Konami released the next Castlevania. Now, they could have just called it Castlevania 4, but instead they called it Super Castlevania 4. Was it worthy of their title? Let's pop the fucker in and find out. This intro sequence blew my fucking mind back in the day. I mean, seriously, when that shit was able to give me the creeps, this made damn sure that shit just got real. And yeah, about the game itself.
Things that I love about Super Castlevania 4!
Everything. It had beautiful graphics that really showed what the 16-bit of the Super Nintendo were capable of, a perfect visual aesthetic, all underlined by an amazingly creepy gothic score that still rings in my ears 20 years later, brilliant level design, tight-ass controls, an incredible amount of detail, tons of different settings, and incredibly well-designed boss battles. You could Indiana Jones yourself through the levels, went through crazy rotating rooms. I seriously wonder who builds all that stuff. And why? Was Dracula like, I'm Frankenstein, come over here. Hey man, what's up man? Do you remember that crazy spinning room in Ripley's, believe it or not?
Yeah, I remember. What about it?
I want you to build this in my castle.
Say what?
It delivered exactly what I came to love about Castlevania on the NES. Just more of everything. The controls were completely overhauled. The whip was made overall more powerful and longer, which seems to make the game easier at first glance, but believe me, it's still hard as balls. And now you could even control Simon while he was jumping. In Castlevania 1, you had to really commit to your jump arc, as you couldn't change the trajectory in mid-air. For the first time in the series, you had the feeling of actually being in control. It felt a lot more freeform and enabled you to do some crazy maneuvers. And finally you had control over the stairs. I mean, Simon could even moonwalk. See, this is way more realistic. This, on the other hand, feels fucking great.
It's video game logic, don't question it.
Now, one of the major flaws of Castlevania 4 was actually the whip, even though it felt awesome. Now, you probably say,
"What the fuck, man? You just said the whip was great? Now, make up your mind."
yeah, see, on the NES you could just shoot your whip straight forward. In Super Castlevania 4, you could whip horizontal, vertical, diagonal, and even squibbly-diagonal. At first glance, this seems like a good thing, right? The problem is that it takes away a lot of the tactical depth of the first games. The whip has become so powerful that it rendered all the secondary weapons obsolete. In game design, the whip is a typical first-order optimal strategy. It's usually an easy-to-learn move that enables new players to feel in control before getting the chance to become more adept in the game. But a good game design should, at some point, put you in situations where this strategy just doesn't cut it anymore, and thereby make you find new ways to overcome obstacles. Let me give you an example. In Castlevania 1, you can pretty much whip your way easily through the first two stages, but eventually you get in a situation, yeah, like this, where the enemy waits for you at the foot of a staircase. As you're not able to shoot the whip in a downward angle, you're forced to use an item like the Holy Water because it is the only way of attacking downrange. In Super Castlevania 4, you just whip the shit out of him. Practically every potentially dangerous situation can be solved by using the whip alone. Most of the time, you don't even care which item you carry, as it just doesn't matter as much as it did in Castlevania 1. I don't say, by all means, that they should leave the new whip controls out. No way. That's what they did in the follow-up title on the Super NES, Castlevania Dracula X, and it felt like a major step backwards. But the designers should have realized how the overhauled whip controls changed the game in its entirety. Instead of just porting the secondary weapons from the NES to the Super Nintendo to stay true to the franchise, they should have overhauled the entire item system in a way that harmonizes with the whip. It would probably already have been enough to make the whip half as effective as the items and the ammunition very scarce. In that way, the items would have had a real value and wouldn't just be a nice-to-have addition to the whip. That doesn't mean that the game is bad because of that. Hell no. To me, it is a perfect game. But it could have been just a little bit more perfect, if you know what I mean. Symphony of the Night, the first Castlevania for the Sony PlayStation. Instead of going for a first-generation 3D game, which lots of the PS1 and N64 titles did at that time, Konami decided to create a 2D platforming masterpiece that draws on the full potential of the console's 32-bit power. It surpasses all the former titles in visual and aesthetic beauty on many levels, and the controls, with their smooth animations perfectly harmonizing with the loud and juicy sound effects, feel more satisfying than ever. It always reminds me of standing on the inside of an arcade machine as a kid. The music is so fantastic. There are tracks that just rock the shit out of you. And other titles that give the game a distinct baroque feeling, which fits the title Symphony of the Night playing perfectly. The more adult-oriented PlayStation lineup allows Castlevania to become overall more bloody and gory, which fits pretty well into the horror aesthetic of the franchise. I don't know, but there's something uniquely satisfying about cutting enemies in half. Disclaimer. Video games do not make people violent. I would never do things like these in real life, as I do not possess a sword with a sharp enough edge.
Hey mama, I made a joke!
In the first minutes of the game you play as Richter Belmont, which is a direct descendant of Simon Belmont. And the first thing you do is you kill Dracula. Yeah, what an epic way to start a game. To be honest, some of the voice acting in the game is actually quite cheesy.
Tribute? You steal men's souls and make them your slave.
Perhaps the same could be said of all religions.
Is he supposed to be the villain? Some might consider it a weakness, but to me it bears a certain PS1 era charm.
What is it?
Blood.
After the Richter intro, you enter the castle as Alucard, which is Dracula's son, and he is powerful as fuck. This guy can make giant wolves explode in one hit and don't even care. Then the Grim Reaper takes away all your weapons and powers and you have to start from scratch with just a rusty butter knife. Meh. It's a nice tease and it shows you what the game is about, advancing to become more powerful. So you stride out to explore Dracula's castle and pretty soon you realize that the map you're uncovering bears a heavy resemblance to a certain well-known game from the SNES era. That's right, it's very obvious that they took a lot of inspiration from Super Metroid in this one. Symphony of the Night actually coined the term Metroidvania for all future Castlevania titles. I personally dislike this term because it implies that these games work in the same way when they actually don't. Yes, you have that big giant maze to explore with save points and that, but where Metroid goes for a more binary approach, which means that most items have one function only that allows you to advance to parts you couldn't get to before, which makes it feel like a big scavenger hunt. Symphony of the Night is not that deliberate. Most of the items are optional, and the experience point system ruins a lot of the potential of that open world, but more on that later. Overall, it's pure gaming bliss. Aside from the obvious things like visuals and controls and sound, there was just so much to discover. You get tons of different weapons and equipment, dozens of cool enemies like these horses cut in half, and skeletons that shoot lasers out of the crotch. And you could summon a little bat friend that fights for you and even turn yourself into a bat, and even learn to see like a bat by emitting ultrasonic sounds. Also, did you notice how your little bat buddy falls in love with you once you turn into a bat yourself? That's just so cutesy-patootsy. The game even had different endings to discover, and I mean real different endings with a totally unique outcome of the story, not "Oh, you fought what, like 60 hours for the fate of the galaxy, made heart-wrenching decisions over life and death of civilizations, had deeply moving romantic affairs with characters you actually care about, now choose one of 3 colors." Bullshit! And in one of the different story arcs, you actually revisit the entire castle upside down. How fucking cool is that? And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. Now, as amazing as this game is, it has certain flaws. Some are minor problems, like the backtracking that can, especially in the upside down castle section, become very tedious. But the biggest design flaw in the game is the experience point based leveling system. Now, before you get your torches and pitchforks ready, hear me out. Symphony of the Night's primary motivation, aside from killing monsters, is exploration. Being intrigued to find new exciting things in Dracula's convoluted maze of a castle. So let's say at some point in the game I encounter a boss battle that wrecks my shit. I can't beat it, no matter how hard I try. Now, in Super Castlevania 4, I know that the boss battle is designed in a way that I must be able to beat it if I just become good enough. In this game, however, I get the idea that
Maybe my character's level is not high enough to beat that motherfucker.
Now, watch this. I just summon my cutesy-patootsy bat friend and stand at a point where enemies are respawning all the time and let the bat do all the work. And now, I just wait. So, how did we do? Let's see, what's that? Level 57? Sounds good to me. Let's try that RagnarRox bitch again. Did you see what just happened? The fight that was practically impossible for me just became a fucking walk in the park. And practically every enemy encounter from now on totally loses its edge, because Alucard and his Arnold bat are way overpowered. And what did I do to achieve that? Did I, the player, improve my skills at pressing buttons? Did I explore uncharted areas of the castle? No! I literally just took a giant dump and watched Star Trek. This completely wrecks the entire balance of the game. It turns the otherwise epic boss battles into boring, obligatory side encounters. Why should I even bother to get lost in this labyrinth when mindlessly killing minions is 10 times more effective? It's just flawed design. Especially when it would have been so easy to circumvent that, and yeah, even turn it into a major strength. You wanna know how? By simply not letting the enemies respawn. It would first make every encounter unique instead of repetitive and daunting, and give you a sense of accomplishment as you, piece by piece, work your way through the castle and see actual progress. And second, and more importantly, it would give the designers total control over how strong you can be at certain points in the game, and thereby guide the player with natural obstacles and encourage him to explore the fucking world. In conclusion, it's the same problem as with Super Castlevania 4. There is this amazing game that I think is, even today, really enjoyable, even when you're not biased by nostalgia like I am. But there is so much missed potential by this major design flaw that it hurts. Now let's address that big stinking elephant in the room. Who wins the Battle of the Castlevanias? Well, it's a trick question. No one wins. Or both win, whichever suits you best. Because it's apples and pears. Although both games are, at first glance, very similar to each other, that is, an action-oriented horror-themed platformer where you kill lots of scary dudes, they are, in terms of basic motivation, completely different games. It really totally depends on what you expect from your game. If you rather explore a vast open-ended maze and love games that leave you a certain amount of freedom, Symphony of the Night is your thing. If you prefer more linear and precisely designed stages and boss battles, and unforgivingly hard challenges that you have to overcome by skill and cunning alone, Super Castlevania 4 will probably suit you better. To say which one is better is a bit like having two children, one that turned out to be a successful, well-known surgeon, and the other one being a famous artist. You love both, and you probably, out of fairness, tell nobody which one is your favorite child, although you know, deep inside of you, that one makes you a little prouder than the other.
But alright, for me, it's Symphony of the Night, because the music is so fucking awesome.
So, which one is your favorite Castlevania? Is it Super Castlevania 4? Symphony of the Night? Or maybe another one? Let me know in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and if you want to see more videos, here are more videos. Oh, and if that wasn't enough Castlevania for you, here's a link to Castlevania Dracula Spectacular by Game Theory. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on RagnarRox.